Family members sobbed outside this Bronx apartment building where 37-year-old Bjana James was murdered inside her home.
When a fun-loving and well-liked mother of two was found murdered in her own home, people were shocked, but it was who killed her, and their reasons for doing so, that were the most upsetting and heartbreaking thing of all. Bjana James was a 37-year-old woman who lived in the Bronx in New York. She had a happy life, and she was surrounded by people who loved and supported her, from family to friends. She was incredibly close to those people, and valued their loyalty just as they valued and trusted in her. Bjana also had two children, who she loved more than anything in the world. Bjana also held down a steady job at the Empire City Casino in Yonkers, earning enough to support her family and her lifestyle. To the outside world, she was living a happy and normal life. But as with many people, you never know what goes on behind closed doors. You see, Bjana also had a partner, a man named Nathan Walsh. The two of them had initially hit it off and seemed like a good and happy couple, but as time wore on, Nathan's true colors started to come out. He started by being verbally abusive and pulling Bjana down at every opportunity, but eventually that verbal violence escalated to physical violence. But Bjana put up with it as she still loved Nathan and didn't want to upset him further. To the outside world, she portrayed happiness and that she was in a loving and stable relationship, but sadly that was not the case. The first signs of things starting to turn extra bad was when Bjana messaged her cousin, saying, "I'm scared for my life. He is bugging out." Again, only a few days later, she texted one of her friends saying a similar thing.
Relatives who declined to go on camera told us the last contact was when James texted a friend saying she was scared of a man she was living with.
He left the house. She wrote back, "He's here, he's back." And ever since she wrote that, we didn't hear from her again. This was not the kind of message that she would have sent to anyone, so things must have been bad for her to reach out like that and let someone else know. However, while her family and friends offered her plenty of support, things suddenly took a dramatic and devastating turn, one that sent ripples through the community. Suddenly, Bjana stopped communicating with anybody. It was not like her at all, as she was always in contact with her family and friends, and constantly on her phone. So for her to go absolutely silent with no warning or reason concerned a lot of people. Still, they gave it a few days, thinking that Bjana might be just taking a break from her phone and social media. It was something that she sometimes said she'd like to do, so her family and friends assumed that she had finally given it a go. But after a few days, when there was still no contacts from Bjana, her closest friends and family went from concerned to outright worried. Hoping to find out how her daughter was and what she was doing, Bjana's mother went to her apartment. Despite loudly knocking on the door and calling her name loudly several times, there was no answer. By Friday, concerned family members decided to go to James's apartment, which was left open. Her brother discovered the grisly scene. One of Bjana's brothers turned up to try to get her to open the door, but there was still no joy and no signs that anyone was home. But rather than walk away, Bjana's brother decided that she wanted to investigate further. Finding that the door was unlocked, they knew something wasn't right and didn't want to leave without answers. Why would the door be unlocked? But she wasn't answering. Her brother and mother walked into Bjana's apartment to be met with the grisliest, most horrific and heartbreaking sight imaginable, one that would leave them scarred for the rest of their lives. Inside the apartment building was Bjana's body, laying in a pool of her own blood. It was clear from the very first glance that she was dead, and that it was far too late for anything to be done.
Police say someone slashed the 37-year-old mother's throat and stabbed her in the chest.
The sight was obviously a horrific one, and her brother and mother both freaked out when they saw her laying there. It was almost beyond belief, and they struggled in vain to try to revive her. Sadly, there was nothing that was going to bring her back at that point, no matter how much they wished they could. The authorities were called, and within minutes, police were on the scene, trying their best to console Bjana's family while gathering as much evidence as they could.
Family members sobbed outside this Bronx apartment building where 37-year-old Bjana James was murdered inside her home.
Why do people do what they do?
This was a crime scene, and the authorities needed to figure exactly why this had happened and who had been the one to attack and kill poor Bjana. Immediately, they got to work in hopes of finding vital evidence that would help them solve the case.
Police say James' throat was slashed, and investigators recovered a knife.
Luckily, they managed to recover the murder weapon, which was vital to finding out who had been the one to kill her. They could analyze the handle of the knife and try to get fingerprints off of it as well as forensic evidence, and then maybe link it to one of the criminals in the police database. Of course, if this was a first-time offender, they would not have anything to match the gathered forensic evidence and fingerprints against. The community was shaken. They could not believe that such a violent and senseless murder could happen to such a lovely and well-liked woman.
It's heartbreaking for something like that to happen. She's a humble person, a mom. I always say hi to everybody when she come out.
He said many around here will not be able to rest until police catch the killer.
There was one upside to this, though. Thankfully, her 2 kids were not at home, and they were staying with their grandparents. They did not have to witness the murder or see the bloody aftermath of the attack. It would in no way be of much consolation to the poor kids, but all things considered, this was a blessing in disguise. Still, at 8 and 12 years old, the 2 kids would undoubtedly be devastated by the loss of their mother in such a terrible and tragic way.
It's painful. It's painful to leave your kids behind like that. And in this area, I mean, I know it's crime all over, but just right here, so close to home. It's too close for comfort.
Friends and relatives started to gather at the apartment building to pay their respects. They even set up a small shrine that they all gathered around to mourn and remember Bjana. Grieving together, everyone was in shock, not being able to believe that this could happen to such a beautiful and promising woman.
Phil, there's dozens of candles and flowers laying here at the base of the apartment building.
And it wasn't just family and friends that gathered. People from all around the area came to visit and console the family. The tight-knit community was starting to pull together to not only remember Bjana, but also condone violence of any kind.
Very somber mood here on the street as people walk by and pause to reflect on what happened.
People wanted action. They wanted the authorities to find the person who had done such a cold and terrible thing. Indeed, they were scared for their own safety. If it could happen to Bjana, then it could happen to any of them, and that was certainly a scary thought for the hard-hit community.
As of tonight, police tell us no arrests have been made. This is still an active investigation.
The police were hot on the train of the culprit, though. They knew it had to have been someone close to Bjana, as there had been no signs of forced entry, and none of the neighbors had indicated hearing any arguing or screaming. The murder had quite literally just happened under their noses, and it didn't take too long until the police's attention was drawn towards one man, Nashan Walsh. He had been Bjana's partner, and the one that she had seemed so worried of in recent weeks. The arthritis spoke to Bjana's family and friends to try to get a sense of what had been going on, and it was clear that they all thought that Nashan could have been the one capable of hurting her. Police started to dig into his past, and were very quickly shocked by how much he had been in trouble with the law. Walsh has 11 prior unsealed arrests dating back to 1995, mostly for robbery and assault, police said. They found that Nashan had been arrested over 10 times over the years, for several different things. He had been caught and arrested for robbery quite a few times, as well as assaulting people. It was quite the rap sheet. But there was one particular thing that stood out to police and made them extra concerned. He has a history as both the perpetrator and victim of domestic violence. Cops said they found that Nashan had also been arrested for domestic violence. He had lashed out and hurt partners before, causing them to call the police. With this information, things started to click into place. There were a lot of red flags pointing towards Nashan possibly been the man responsible for Bjana's murder. Not only had he got a history of violence, but friends and family of Bjana say that she had been concerned about his behavior recently. Convinced that they had uncovered the murderer, the authorities swooped into action, ready to bring justice down on the person who had so savagely and senselessly slain Bjana.
Police have arrested her boyfriend and charged him with murder.
The homicide investigation led police to 35-year-old Nashan Walsh, who NYPD officials confirmed was dating James. When they arrived at the location where Nashan was, officers prepared to cuff him, but he was not willing to go quietly. When first responders arrived, Walsh reportedly tackled one to the ground and headbutted another, causing the provider to lose consciousness. When they tried to cuff him, Nashan tackled the police officers to the ground and even headbutted one so hard that they blacked out. Eventually he was subdued, but it was not an easy task. The assault on the officers alone was enough to land him in jail, but that was not why they were there. They were there for answers about Bjana's death. When they took him into custody, Nashan tried to make excuses, telling detectives that he was staying elsewhere and he hadn't even seen Bjana that evening. He also told them that he was on drugs too and that he wasn't responsible for any of his actions that night, but the evidence was just too much to ignore. Not only did they have good cause to believe that he was the man that slashed Bjana's throat and stabbed her in the chest, but they also had some solid airtight evidence. The knife they had found in her apartment on the night of her murder was covered in his fingerprints, as well as forensic evidence that undoubtedly linked Nashan to the weapon. He could try to make all the excuses that he wanted, but the truth is that the police now knew that he was the one who had been there and plunged the knife. Once Nashan knew that there was no escape and that he couldn't avoid justice, he finally started to open up a little about what had happened on the night of the murder. I stabbed her a couple of times in a rage, Walsh admitted to police after his arrest. In the neck. She was on the couch. He finally admitted to his role in killing Bjana, saying that the two of them were in a domestically violent relationship. On the night in question, he had been on drugs and had flown into a rage during an argument. It was at this point he pulled out a sharp knife and attacked Bjana as she was on the couch. It was as if he had seen red and just acted on instinct, lashing out and hurting Bjana. He had lost control of his actions, but while this may have been the case, there was no excuse for what had happened, and it would not help him in the slightest when it came to avoiding jail time. In fact, it was nailed on that he would spend the rest of his natural life beyond bars. Walsh was charged with murder, manslaughter, and weapon possession, in addition to assault and harassment charges for his attack on first responders. Ultimately, Nishan faced inescapable charges: murder, manslaughter, and weapon possession. He was also charged with assault and harassment of first responders who had come to arrest him. But even after all of that, Bjana's family felt no real sense of justice been done. Sure, the man responsible for her murder was going to end up behind bars, but it would never bring Bjana back, and that's what hurt the most of all. In fact, Bjana's mother summed up the senseless murder perfectly. Speaking to an NBC New York media outlet, she said, "I feel like if anyone knows about anybody that's having a violence problem, don't hide from it, let someone know, because all of this could have been avoided." Domestic violence cases are all too common in the US and around the world, and it's a cycle that seems to have no end. But if you are suffering from domestic abuse, reach out and contact establishments and people who can help before it's too late, because you don't want to become another statistic in the history of domestic abuse. So now it's over to you. What did you think of this story? Do you think that this senseless murder could have been avoided? As always, we love to hear from you, so be sure to leave your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Please give this video a like and a subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.